Bet you've never seen marks that resemble ice cream scoop marks left in solid bedrock. Let us look at the ancient Egyptian massive granite obelisk, left protruding from the Aswan quarry. The marks seen on this massive unfinished granite obelisk, as well as those seen throughout the hillside terrain of the Aswan quarry, are not actually scoop marks. That is, the ancient Egyptians were not softening the bedrock and scooping it out. Additionally, those marks in the bedrock were definitely not made from bashing granite with handheld diorite pounders, as each mark is as much as 50 inches wide and some 6 to 8 inches deep. Instead, the ancient Egyptians clearly were softening the bedrock, or making it brittle and grinding it down. Clearly, something abrasive or something spinning made those marks. In other words, they were easily carving massive three-dimensional objects or shapes into the bedrock before removing them from the slots they were in. Their techniques for working stone would be more familiar to us when it comes to techniques for working wood. Thus, they were carving the desired shape all in one piece while it was in the ground. Granite is so difficult to cut that for modern companies, diamond saw blades or wire saws are preferred for cutting it due to their exceptional hardness and efficiency in working such hard materials. Even materials like tungsten carbide typically find application in certain drilling or machining tools, but is not the primary choice for cutting granite. Yet in ancient Egypt, the marks seen etched directly onto the outer surface of the unfinished obelisk are the same as those seen some 15 meters away from the main body of the obelisk, which means that while those marks play no significant role in the final shape of the obelisk, they ultimately demonstrate how easy it would have been for the ancient Egyptians to cut into granite, given that they left so many errant marks in the bedrock, even in spots where cutting wasn't needed and wasn't a necessity. Thus, even with modern machinery, we have not seen signs that we are anywhere near starting to catch up to what the ancient Egyptian empire was doing to granite. This isn't vibranium or adamantium, it's simply the igneous bedrock of continental Africa. Yet, look at the extreme amount of stress that this modern hardened steel machine is going through. And archaeologists still expect us to believe that in Egypt, they did it all by hand, with slave labor and copper tools, and not with any type of iron tools that were forged via a kiln or furnace, just with tiny brittle copper hammers and chisels. This block being transported on this flatbed weighed just under 80 tons, and its density is not even comparable to granite. And look how precariously it has to be transported out of the quarry, like just a giant accident waiting to happen. And yet they expect us to believe that the ancient Egyptians extracted even larger blocks and traversed across the hilly terrain of the Aswan quarry, bringing these blocks with them, out of those precariously positioned granite outcrops, and even extracted several 800-ton single-piece obelisk, as well as the 200-ton serapeum boxes, all by hand, then transported them some 500 miles, on some tiny 40-meter wooden boats. In that case, we have to insist that the archaeologists and the so-called experts are clearly wrong, because unfortunately, that's not how either buoyancy and water displacement or inertia and momentum works. Only Asians could accomplish this in modern times, without a shadow of a doubt. Or should I say, only Asians are crazy enough to even attempt this. Where you need a 2,900-ton counterweight, a 50-meter radius cast iron hook, several kilometer length of high-tension wire, a 1,000-ton super-large crawler crane, on a platform with hundreds of wheels and dozens of axles. To move this, yet archaeologists, in their infinite wisdom, expect us to believe that the ancient Egyptians not only made this 1,200-ton obelisk with sticks and stones and copper, but was also going to move it with twigs and logs and slide it across the desert sand atop wooden sleds. Unfortunately, that's not how physics or engineering works. Twigs are not known for their tensile strength, and dried tree trunks are not known to be load-bearing, over 5 tons. Yet these historians are adamant that the ancient Egyptians would accomplish it all, not because they were trained experts with advanced tools or machinery, but because they had good slaves, with rocks and sticks and copper. The ancient Egyptians were experts at cutting and moving multi-ton blocks with relative ease. But what's so special about stacking rocks, when we now have computers and live in skyscrapers? It is only with the use of this type of modern machinery that we've seen signs that we might be starting to catch up to what the ancient Egyptian empire once was. And whether we like it or not, skyscrapers too are all simply rocks and minerals from the ground, just like the pyramids. And while the pyramids will definitely last another 10,000 years, most skyscrapers certainly won't. These limestone blocks clearly weren't removed from the bedrock of the Giza Plateau, using the wedge and peg method to crack the rocks, because of the massive gaps between adjacent blocks and the clearly identifiable grid lines. Plus, all the wedge and peg method of quarrying stones was done by Roman soldiers to break up blocks that were already shaped from a much older time, but that the Romans found too big to move in one piece. Nonetheless, all this is limestone, and so unlike granite, it could easily have been quarried by teams of people with iron, or copper and bronze chisels and pickaxes, or even dolerite pounder stones, rather than any type of advanced machinery or massive circular saws. Why don't we question who built the pyramids in Mexico? One reason is, the stones used are very small and can be lifted and gathered very easily. The rocks used are not very hard, and weren't even cut or reshaped. They were just placed in the wall with cement, in the same condition they were found. Why don't we question who built the cathedrals in Europe? While these structures are magnificent, they are not thousands of years old. No single block in these structures weighs several kilotons, and both modern and medieval masons with simple tools have always been able to perform major and minor repairs and renovations, removing and replacing limestone and marble blocks with relative ease. On the other hand, the Egyptian pyramids were built with far larger and harder stones. When was the last time you saw a whole team accurately removing, replacing, and renovating hundreds of missing or broken 40 to 80-ton granite blocks atop the Egyptian pyramids? I'll wait. Whether it's a team of archaeologists, engineers, or government-sanctioned officials, I have yet to have seen it done, whether here in modern times or during Roman times. And they say all this work done in basalt stone was done using only copper tools and copper chisels. But somehow we can't replicate any of this in basalt, using even power tools. We can only replicate it in marble and limestone.
So let's establish the context and evidence around the orthodox explanation that it was pounding stones that made all of these scoop marks. It boils down to some very simple logic, as explained by Engelbach. They found dolerite or diorite pounders here, so therefore that's what must have made these marks. It's exactly the same logic that leads us to the copper chisel conclusion. They found copper chisels from ancient Egypt, so that's what must have made all of the remarkable precision boxes, slabs, vases, etc. Because no other tools have been found, no other tools could have been used. Yet the obvious evidence for other tools is right in front of us. It's in the stonework itself. The signatures of large circular saws, tubular drills, and other forms of advanced machining have been explored in depth on this channel and by many other researchers, having first been brought to light more than a century ago by pioneers like Flinders Petrie. But in today's time, this evidence is generally ignored by mainstream academia. Although some attempts have been made, there's not been one single object ever recreated by experimentalists using solely the primitive methods, the copper drag saws, chisels, and pounding stones, that are supposedly responsible for the many thousands of incredible examples we can still view with our own eyes on ancient sites and in museums. Not one granite block has been cut, not one single-piece precision box made, not one wafer-thin or perfectly balanced vase carved, nor a single structure built in today's time using solely primitive means as a demonstration or proof of these methods.
The pyramids are so massive. There's 2,300,000 stones.
Yes. How are the pyramids built?
How did they do it? No one knows. No one has any good ideas. All the ideas suck. All of them are like ridiculous.
Like, if we don't know how they built the pyramids, 3,000 or 4,000, or actually, we don't know when the pyramids were built, to be totally honest.
Who knows how many thousand years ago? You can't carbon date stone. This is all guesswork.
All wisdom begins with acknowledging what you don't know. And anyone who tells you, I know the answer.
No, they definitely don't. No, there's archaeologists have attributed it to certain pharaohs, but there's a lot of problems with that. First of all, the Great Pyramids, they said they think they're tombs, right?
Right.
But there's no evidence that they're tombs. They've never found like pharaohs in them or anything. There's stones that were cut from a quarry that was 500 miles away. Like, they have no idea how they did that. No idea how they moved them.
So never trust anybody who claims to have it all figured out, because he's lying to you.
They probably had technology that we haven't figured out yet, because we went to combustion engines and electricity.
Yes, this is exactly how the ancient Egyptians chiseled and cut granite. Without the existence of TV, cell phones, or the internet to distract them, and with nothing but time on their hands, the craftsmen and slaves of Egypt, for generations, learned to become master carvers that were able to use copper tools to flawlessly work and shape granite. How hard is granite compared to copper? Well, that's not important. Just know they used those simple tools to effortlessly sculpt granite like it was as soft as wood.
I said, hold up, wait a minute, some Something ain't right.
Diamond-tipped saws or blades are commonly used to cut through granite efficiently. Special water-cooled diamond wire saws can be used for precision cutting. Achieving a polished finish on granite involves multiple steps, including grinding and polishing with abrasive materials. This process can be labor-intensive and time-consuming. Granite is highly resistant to scratching, heat, and chemical damage. Its hardness contributes to these properties. Is this what they did in ancient Egypt to get massive blocks to fit perfectly? Did they adorn themselves in the best robes and, of course, no protective helmets, just the finest work sandals, to get onto the pharaoh's worksite, get out their toolbox, get out their plumb bob to make sure the vertical lines are level, get out their reel of string to make sure everything is about the appropriate length, get out their calipers, protractors, chalks, and wax crayons, then with their pencil behind their ear and with no dust storms in sight. They then get their team of 500 skilled servants or retainers to get to work with their copper handsaws, chisels, and pounding stones, pouring sand and water on the stones to cut perfect grooves and smooth down the stones, to get perfect 90-degree straight edges and corners. Then they use a strategic pulley and ramp system to heave-ho each 40-ton block like they were just fetching a bucket of water from a nearby well. They then get that block perfectly fitted to the contours of all other blocks already assembled in the wall by all other teams, which allowed them to get 360 degrees of perfection across the entirety of the cross-section of the pyramid. People keep insisting that they know for sure that we can replicate the pyramids with modern technology, and they swear that they have seen it done, or if not that, they then say we have the capability to do it, but it's just expensive now. So that's why we don't do it. But they fail to realize that the pyramid is a literal mountain, comprising some 2.5 million individual multi-ton blocks, each moved individually, lifted, cut, placed, and shaped and reshaped repeatedly. To put this into some perspective, let's look at what it would take to mine a solid block of granite from a quarry, then bring it miles in a truck to a worksite. The weight your vehicle can take depends on the number of axles it has. Most 6-axle vehicles allow for 44 tons, as long as it also follows conditions set forward by the government. So, moving 80 tons or 200 tons, you are looking at the vehicle reaching critical failure.